Yes.
Okay. And who was your boss, the man who asked you to do this analysis of the pending lawsuits?
I don't remember who exactly asked me to do that, this particular study.
Okay. Your direct boss at that time would have been Jack Wallace.
Yes.
Is he the boss you were referring to when you said it was your boss that told you to do that?
He would be the boss who gave me most of my assignments. This particular study, I don't remember if he asked me to do that or not.
And you don't know if it was him or maybe Mr. Dorsham or Mr. Ball?
That's very possible.
You just don't recall?
I don't recall.
But in any event, it was someone who was superior to you that gave you the assignment?
Yes.
Okay. And that study, or I'm going to call it, we'll call this, this analysis of these lawsuits, was done also in the summer of 1973, wasn't it?
Yes.
Now, this particular study, you worked with some of the corporate staff at the General Motors Tech Center over in Warren. Is that right?
Yes.
And Warren, so the jury knows, is about 90 miles from Lansing.
That's correct.
So you would have to travel 90 miles in order to do this particular project.
Yes.
And the people at corporate staff that you worked with, to the best of your recollection, were engineers?
Yes, they were engineers.
You weren't working with anyone out of the GM legal department at that time?
No, I was not.
And the tech center where you went to go meet with these corporate staff people, again, this is the same tech center where the project cars were being designed, correct?
Yes.
And that is where the
Yes.
A car was ultimately designed, in Warren.
I don't know which A car or...
The 1978 A-body vehicle, are you aware that that was designed at the tech center in Warren?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So that's the same place you went to meet with corporate staff regarding this analysis of the pending lawsuits?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in order to do this analysis of the pending lawsuits, corporate staff provided you with certain materials, is that right?
They let me look at the files that related to the lawsuit.
And as I understand it, you looked at about 10 pending lawsuits at that time.
There were, I don't remember the exact number, but it was approximately 10, yes.
Right. And the 10 lawsuits that you looked at were all lawsuits where the fuel tank was located behind the rear axle, correct?
If I think of all the different cars, yes.
Okay. And just so the jury knows, when we talk about a fuel tank that was located behind the rear axle, I want you to take a look at this photograph. We'll mark this as Exhibit 3 to your deposition. Does this photograph show the behind the axle type of fuel tank that you were looking at in the lawsuits that were pending against General Motors at that time?
Objection to the use of the photograph.
It's approximately the same as those, yes.
Okay, and could you just hold that up so the jury can see it and our cameraman can zoom in on it? It's painted yellow in this particular photograph, but that yellow fuel tank shows a fuel tank located behind the rear axle and before the rear bumper, right?
It's in front of the rear bumper, yes.
Okay, and it's behind the rear axle.
Yes.
And the 10 lawsuits, or the 10 or so lawsuits that you analyzed that were pending against General Motors at that time had fuel tanks that were located in approximately the same location.
That's correct.
All right. And in addition to looking at the lawsuits, they gave you photographs of the cars that had been involved in those accidents?
I did not look at any of the legal documents. I looked at the photographs and the accident reports.
Okay. And the corporate staff also provided you with some academic studies related to fuel-fed fires. Is that right?
Yes, I don't know it was at exactly the same time, but they were the ones that let me look at those academic studies also, yes.
All right. So to do this analysis of the pending lawsuits against General Motors, you looked at some of these academic studies, some photographs, some accident reports, and then came up with some general conclusions regarding the lawsuits that were then and there pending against General Motors.
Yes.
Is that right? As I understand it, your conclusions were that of the 10 cases that you looked at, they fell into 2 general categories. Is that right?
Yes.
One category would be those accidents where the impact was very severe and no one would expect the fuel system to survive under any circumstances. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And the second category of accidents that you analyzed were those where the car had run over a road hazard and there was very little damage to the car itself, yet the bottom of the fuel tank had been ripped open by the fuel hazard. Is that right?
Yes, that was things such as a car getting up on top of a guardrail. I remember one that was, they'd ran over a 55-gallon steel drum. And these objects had cut holes in the bottom of the fuel tank.
In fact, sir, isn't it true that of the 10 lawsuits that you analyzed, it actually fell into about half and half? Half of the lawsuits were those where there was severe impact to the cars, and the other half of the lawsuits were those where the fuel tanks had been penetrated by road hazards, and there was very little damage to the cars.
Asked and answered.
That's as best I recall, yes.
Okay. Now, if it was half and half, there'd be about, if it was approximately 10 that you look at, there'd be about 5 lawsuits pending against General Motors at that time, where there was very little damage to the car, yet the fuel tank had been penetrated by some type of a road hazard or external object, right?
Repetitive.
The last part was true. I don't recall exactly how much other damage there was to the car.
But you recall there was not much damage done to the cars in those accidents.
That's correct.
All right. Now, you gave us an example of a guardrail and a drum that had punctured some of these fuel tanks from below. What were the other 2 or 3 cases like? What were the facts in those cases where the fuel tank had been penetrated by a road hazard? Do you remember?
Those are the only 2 specific ones I remember. I don't remember what the other ones were.
All right. You don't remember what they were, but there were other instances where the fuel tank had been penetrated by a road hazard as well.
That's correct.
Okay. And would you agree with me, sir, that the placement of the fuel tank behind the rear axle was a contributing cause to the fuel-fed fire in those pending lawsuits because the fuel tank was located at the bottom of the car?
Objection. Vague and ambiguous. Objection.
I don't think it matters whether it was behind the axle or not. If a fuel tank is the lowest part of the car, you're subject to some road hazard damage.
Okay. And if the tank had been located somewhere else other than the lowest part of the car, then in those accidents, the fuel tank may very well not have been penetrated, correct?
Objection. Speculative. Objection to the form.
I mean, those were your conclusions.
Well, I would say that's correct, yes.
Okay. And wouldn't you also agree that in those situations, if there had been a shield protecting the fuel tanks in those accidents, that the shield may have very well prevented the fuel tank from getting penetrated?
Objection. Vague.
I don't recall considering the issues of shields or that, so I wouldn't. I'm not a fuel system expert, so I don't care to speculate on that.
Okay. So you don't have any opinions as to whether a shield would have prevented those accidents where you saw that the fuel tank had been penetrated from below?
No, I don't have an opinion on that.
All right. Now, after you did this analysis at the request of your boss and you met with the people at corporate staff, you gave a report to somebody concerning your conclusions and your findings, correct?
I don't recall giving any report on that, because I don't remember writing anything down, and I frankly don't remember giving a report.
Well,
I do remember those conclusions.
Okay, you remember those conclusions, right?
Yeah.
And it's been almost 25 years now. You do remember the conclusions.
Yes.
How about who you told those conclusions to? You certainly told them to somebody, didn't you?
Objection.
That would be an
Argumentative.
assumption on my part. I don't remember.
Well, in the ordinary course of your practice back then, if someone had given you an assignment to do something, you would do the job and then report back to that person what your conclusions were, right?
Objection to the form.
That would be the normal course of action.
And you have no reason to doubt that that's exactly what was done in this situation, correct?
Objection argumentative and speculative.
I don't have any reason to consider something was done, but as I told you before, I don't remember who asked me to do it, and I subsequently don't remember who I reported to if I did.
Well, we know it was your boss that asked you to do it, don't we?
Objection that misstates prior testimony that that it was the boss.
Well, we know it was your boss that asked you to do this analysis of the pending lawsuits against General Motors, don't we?
Same objection.
My boss at the time was Mr. Wallace. Like I said, I do not recall him asking me to do this. It could have been someone else. I don't remember.
I understand you don't remember who the boss was that asked you to do it, but you have testified in the past that it was your boss that asked you to do this analysis of pending lawsuits, right?
I would not have done it on my own.
Okay, you did it at the request of your boss, didn't you?
Someone...
Argumentative, repetitive.
Did you do it at the request of your boss, sir?
Same objection.
I would have done it at the request of a superior in the engineering department. I don't remember who that was.
Do you remember giving your deposition in the case of Ruano versus General Motors on May 28, 1992, which is about 5 years ago? Do you remember giving a deposition in that case?
No, I don't.
Well, let me show you the testimony that you gave in that case on page 27 and 28. And I've highlighted the pertinent portions here. Take a moment and look at the questions and your answers on page 27 and line 28 and see if that helps refresh your recollection as to who asked you to do the analysis of the pending lawsuits against General Motors.
Yes.
Does that indicate that it was your boss that asked you to do it?
That's what I said back in 1992.
Is that the truth?
It was at the time, yes.
Is it still the truth?
Like I said, I don't remember who asked me. It could have been my boss. I could speculate on, you know, as many times as you want, but I don't care to. Right today, I don't remember who asked me.
Okay. Were you asked the question in 92, or did you say who told you to do the project in 1992?
Repetitive and
I don't
argumentative.
give a name here, so.
Can I see it, please? Do you remember being asked at page 27, line 21 at this deposition, did you work with corporate staff to analyze any types of lawsuits? And your answer was, the only thing that I did was looked at pending litigation in this area of fuel-fed fires, and I looked at the documentation, not to help anyone else, but basically at the request of my boss to look at those to see whether, if there were any things that would relate to future designs that we could learn from that litigation. Do you remember those questions and those answers? Do you remember those questions being asked and given that answer back in 1992, sir?
I don't remember that, but I do, agree that I said that back in 1992.
And that was the truth?
Yes.
And at that time you said that you did this analysis of the pending litigation at the request of, quote, my boss, unquote. Correct?
Answered argumentative.
That's what I said back in 1992.
And your boss at that time was Mr. Wallace, wasn't he?
That's correct.
Answered.
Now, in the ordinary course of things, sir, if Mr. Wallace had asked you to do this project and he was your boss back in 1973, would you, as a matter of course, after you completed this, have reported back to him what your findings were?
Asked and answered speculative.
I think I stated before that that's a normal course of business. But I also said I didn't remember giving a report.
But you don't have any reason, as you sit here today, to doubt that you would have done your normal practice back then, correct?
Speculative.
All I can tell you is I don't remember. I am not going to speculate on what I did or didn't. I can tell you what I remember today.
Okay. Do you have any reason, sir, to doubt that you would have followed your normal pattern and your normal activities back in 1973?
No, I don't have any.
Repetitive.
Okay.
I don't have any reason.
almost done? You represented that it'd be a half an hour, and Mr. Ivey came down based on that representation.
Well, as I understand it, Mr. Gerber, Mr. Ivey was here for another deposition this morning.
That's right.
We had him scheduled for this morning, and you asked me if I would reschedule it till this afternoon, which I did. And I will finish what
And you
I'm
said it'd be
finished.
done in a half an hour, and the other deposition was scheduled before this one.
Do you want Mr. Ivey to come back tomorrow morning? Are we in a
I'd
rush
rather
to-
finish them up, but I think if you're going to tell me that it's going to take about a half an hour and I bring a man down here, I would hope that you try to meet that goal.
Yeah, we'll finish when I'm finished. And if Mr. Ivey needs to leave for some reason, we'll continue at some other time. Now, in addition to doing the junkyard survey and the analysis of lawsuits pending against General Motors in the summer of 1973, you also prepared a value analysis, did you not, sir?
Yes, I did.
And I'd like to show you this document, which we'll have marked as Exhibit 4 to your deposition. And I would like for you to tell me if this two-page document marked as Exhibit 4, bearing Bates numbers 28196 and 28197, is an accurate copy of the value analysis that you prepared.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, the document that you're holding in your hands is entitled what, please?
Value analysis of auto, fuel-fed, fire-related fatalities.
Okay. And that was dated what date, please?
June the 29th, 1973.
And that was the summer of 1973.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the document that you're holding in your hands is a report, isn't it?
Objection.
It's a, all I can say, it's a document. I don't know that I would say it's a report.
Have you in the past testified that that document is a report, sir?
I don't remember.
Well, let me try and refresh your recollection on that on a couple of different occasions. First, we'll take a look at the deposition testimony that you gave in the Koval case on July 15th, 1992. On page 31, line 10. And the lawyer taking your deposition at that time, well, actually, let me show it to you first. Let me refresh your recollection. Then I'll ask you some specific questions. Do you remember giving that testimony under oath, sir?
No, I don't.
Okay. When you give your testimony under oath in front of court reporters at depositions, I assume you are telling the truth?
Yes.
Okay. And do you remember at that particular time you were shown the memo that I just showed you, and you were asked the question, now did you, sir, as a result of that activity, did you with Mr. Muddy and Mr. Reinauer, did you prepare this document I'm marking as Plaintiff's Exhibit 1? And your answer was, I can't recall why this particular report was written.
Objection. That is an improper impeachment. It's disconnected.
Okay. Do you remember referring to the document that's in front of you today, sir, at that time as a report?
Wait a second. You've got to show him the document that was attached and asked about during that deposition. There's no connection that what was asked about during that deposition, the exhibit referred to, is the exhibit that's in front of him now.
All right, well, let me continue on. The next question was, it appears, let me ask you, sir, if on the second page of this report, incidentally, it's titled Value Analysis of Auto Fuel-Fed Fire-Related Fatalities, is it not? Your answer was yes. And on the second page, does it bear your signature? Answer, yes, that's my signature. So at the time you were shown the document marked as Exhibit 1 by those lawyers, your answer was that you could not recall why this particular report was written. Correct?
That's what I said, yes.
Okay, and it was you, sir, who characterized it as a report on that date.
Apparently I did, yes.
Okay, and would it be fair, sir, today to characterize that document that you're holding in your hands as a report?
I don't know that today I would characterize it as a report.
But you did
Obviously I did back then.
back in 1992. Is there any reason, sir, that you would not characterize it as a report today?
Yes, mainly because that a report normally is distributed to people, and I don't believe this was ever distributed to anyone.
Well, sir, we'll get to that in a moment. You don't know whether this document was ever distributed to anyone, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. But other than that, you certainly characterized it as a report in the Koval case back in 1992, did you not?
That's an answer.
That's what's stated there.
Okay. And in 1991, in the Mosley case, your deposition was taken. You remember that by Mr. Jim Butler?
Yes, I do.
And you remember characterizing the document that you're holding in your hands as a report at that time?
I don't remember whether I said it or not.
All right. Let me show you that deposition. Again, you remember being under oath and being in front of a court reporter and being asked questions by Mr. Butler on that date?
Yes, I did.
That was May 2nd, 1991. Go ahead and take a look at page 43 first, and let's see if it refreshes your recollection. Page 43, starting on line 7.
Yes.
And did you on that date also refer to the document marked here as Exhibit 4? Did you refer to it as a report on that date?
Yes, I did.
Now, when we use the word report, we're talking about something that would be reported to somebody else, aren't we?
Objection to the form.
That's a typical
Definition of report.
definition, yes. Right.
Okay. And this particular report, sir, or this document marked as Exhibit 4, is a cost-benefit analysis, isn't it?
I don't know that I would characterize it as a cost-benefit.
Well, it could certainly be construed by someone to be a cost-benefit analysis, couldn't it?
Speculative.
It could, yes.
If the jury in this case were to look at that document and construe it as a cost-benefit analysis, that would certainly be within the realm of human understanding, correct?
Speculative.
That's very possible.
Now, you don't recall who gave you the particular assignment to prepare that value analysis, do you?
Asked and answered, it assumes facts not in evidence.
I don't believe I've ever recalled anyone asking me to do this.
Okay. Do you remember testifying in the Jam Poll case that you don't recall who asked you to do that analysis?
Lack of predicate.
I could have stated it that way, but I would say that I don't recall anyone asking me to do this analysis.
Okay. Let's take a look at that.
Do you want to, obviously it's gone longer than expected.
No,
You
let's
want to
finish
keep going? Okay. I apologize for that, by the way.
Do you remember, sir, being asked at that time, and this deposition we referred to earlier was taken on March 5th, 1986, in the case of Jampol versus General Motors. And do you remember being asked at that time who asked you to write the analysis?
No, I don't remember that question.
Take a look at page 41, line 3 of that deposition and see if that refreshes your recollection.
Yeah, I stayed here. I do not recall if anyone asked me to write this report. That's the same thing I've said today.
I don't think that's what it says, sir. Let me see it. Do you remember being asked on page 41, line 3, question, who asked you to write this analysis? Answer, I do not recall. Question, was it somebody within your chain of supervision or somebody outside of that? Answer, I do not recall if anyone asked me to write this report. Was that your testimony at that time?
Like a predicate
Yes.
then for
Is
the
that your
impeachment?
testimony today?
I do not recall anyone asking me to write this report.
Okay. Is it possible, sir, that the people who asked you to write this report were the same people who you don't recall, who asked you to do the analysis of the pending fuel-fed fire litigation?
Speculative and assumes fact, not in evidence.
I've stated I don't remember anyone asking me, and I'm not going to speculate that someone could have.
Well, you know that you used certain academic studies in arriving at some of the conclusions in the report in front of you, didn't you?
That's correct.
And those academic studies were given to you by the people who asked you to do the analysis of the pending fuel-fed fire litigation.
No, they were not.
They were given to you by the corporate staff at General Motors.
Yes.
Okay. Is it possible that since you used those studies given to you by the corporate staff at General Motors as part of the analysis of the fuel-fed fire cases pending against General Motors, that it was those same people who asked you to prepare this value analysis? Is it possible?
Vague and ambiguous. Speculative.
Well, I don't know that I understood your question. Can you restate it?
Okay, sure. You have testified in the past, and I assume you will testify today, that part of the basis for your conclusions in this report marked as Exhibit 4 were based upon the academic studies that were given to you by GM corporate staff, correct?
That's correct.
And those studies were given to you in connection with your analysis of the pending fuel-fed fire cases against General Motors.
I don't know if those two particular things are connected. I got those documents from the same people. I do remember that.
Right. And the same documents that you looked at in the fuel-fed fire litigation are the same documents that you used in your value analysis, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So then could we assume that it's possible that the people that ask you to do the fuel-fed fire litigation are the same people that ask you to do this value analysis?
Speculative.
Well, you could assume that, but I'm not going to speculate. I don't remember anyone ever asking me to write this report.
You don't know one way or the other, do you?
All I can tell you is I don't remember anyone asking me to write this report. And I also don't believe anyone did.
Okay. Well, you don't remember who asked you to do the fuel-fed analysis, do you?
No, I do not.
Okay. And yet that was done?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you don't remember who asked you to do the fuel-fed analysis, and it was done. You don't remember who asked you to do the value analysis, and it was done, correct?
Compound and repetitive.
I've stated I do not remember anyone asking me to do this, and I've also stated that I don't believe anyone did.
Okay. But, sir, the truth of the matter is someone asked you to do the analysis of the pending lawsuits against General Motors, didn't they?
That's correct.
You don't remember who that person was?
Repetitive.
No, I do not.
Okay. And part of the documents that you were given to do that analysis are the academic studies that you used in this value analysis memorandum, correct?
Repetitive.
No, I didn't state it that way. I said that I got those documents from the same people.
Right. And the documents that you got from corporate staff to do the analysis of the pending fuel-fed fire litigation are the same documents that form part of the basis for your opinions in Exhibit 4.
Repetitive.
Same documents.
I said I got them from the same people. I did not say I used those academic documents in the litigation study.
But you used the documents that you got in the litigation study in your value analysis memorandum, didn't you?
Repetitive.
I did not. I have never stated that I got those documents in regard to the litigation study. I said I got them from the same people.
You got the documents, the academic studies,
Yes.
from the same people who gave you the documents to look to analyze the pending lawsuits against General Motors.
Repetitive.
That's correct.
Okay. At At the time that you did this value analysis marked as Exhibit 4, you only took assignments from Mr. Wallace or people higher up in management. Isn't that true?
That's correct.
Someone may have asked you to do this analysis. Someone may not have asked you to do this analysis. You just don't know one way or the other, do you?
Repetitive and compound.
I have stated many times, I don't recall anyone asking me to do this report.
But someone may have asked you to do it and you just don't remember, correct?
Asked and answered, repetitive.
I don't believe anyone asked me to do this report.